I don't know what she did to the time. So, but we did see some part of Bangladesh, Dhaka today, and it was nice, just like Bombay. Yeah, how do I get started? Okay, so I'm going to talk on the topic of clinical MR spectroscopy of brain. And I had the opportunity, or I was lucky to have been in the right place at the right time. In 2000, we got a new 1.5 Tesla machine. And that time MR spectroscopy was clinically just starting to get available. That means there was not enough data on that. There were just some few papers which said that, just some few papers in which some lesions were described. So it was just starting to come into clinical practice. And just to say thanks to all the people who organized for me to be here. And at that point in time, because the machines were getting better and the clinicians had better medicine, so clinical medicine was developing and imaging technology was developing. So the mindset was shifting from anatomy and morphology to become looking at metabolic and functional imaging. So that was the turning point around the year 2000. And when I got that technique, and I was trying to read before the machine came, I was going crazy because everything had low NA, everything had high choline, and everything had lipid lactate. So we were not sure what we were going to do. But how did I try to get a learning curve for myself was that I did MR spectroscopy on all the patients, including normals of all ages, and any abnormality which came. And then I learned from that. And then after 4 years, I had a chance to visit Dr. Brian Ross's center and luckily get the fine-tuning done onto what I had learned on my own. So how is MRS possible? It's because the nature and concentration of the brain metabolites is constant. So even if there is a small variation, you can detect it. And the changes happen in a very reproducible manner. That means if you change created the same changes again and again, you will get the same pattern. Just like you get the same pattern in infarction. Every time there is an infarction, you get the same pattern. Even in MR spectroscopy, every time you changed the brain parenchyma to a certain type of disease, you got the same pattern, and so then you can interpret it and call it a certain type of disease process. So how is MR spectroscopy possible? We are looking at certain active atoms which have some odd number of electrons. Example, hydrogen and phosphorus. These are the ones which are most commonly used. So whenever there is an external magnetic field applied to the body part, in addition to the usual magnetic field which is there in the magnet, because of these odd number of electrons, certain substances or metabolites create a small electrical field around themselves. So the actual effective magnetic field is slightly different from what is being applied. So you have a local magnetic field which interferes with the applied magnetic field, and that's how you get this. So this is what it means. If you are in the magnet, this is the magnetic field, but because of this electron, there is a disturbance here, and that is what we are trying to measure. Now that magnetic field is in the form of the unit hertz of frequency, but that is converted to parts per million to make it independent of the strength of the magnet. That means you'll get the same pattern whether you look at a 0.5 Tesla machine giving you an MR spectroscopy, or you look at 1.5 T, or you look at 3 T. That's why you don't have any changes in the pattern. So there are several protons or proton-like substances which you look at in the brain or in other body parts like liver or heart, etc. You can do MR spectroscopy of all the body parts. But what is most popular has been brain proton spectroscopy and prostate proton spectroscopy, because they have reproducibility which you can base your clinical decisions upon. Phosphorus has been tried. In fact, phosphorus was the first molecule which was studied on MR spectroscopy in the rat muscle, and the alterations in ATP and ADP which happened because of this. But what became more popular is proton spectroscopy because of the way it is present in the body. There is so much of abundance of protons in the body that you can study any body part with it. Now what is important is how is it different from an imaging? That means what you're doing routinely when you're acquiring an MR image, you already have the MR spectroscopy data in that. But it is not visible because of the low concentrations. So you have molar unit of concentration in an imaging voxel where you get the grayscale anatomic imaging. But when you want to concentrate on getting information in the chemical forms, you have to go down to concentrations which are in the millimolar range. So that is why spectro data is already in the imaging data, but you have to separate out the two. How do you achieve that? Just to show you, this is the water signal. That means all the protons from the water are giving you this signal. These are the protons from the metabolites. So when you want data like this to amplify this, you have to suppress all the water signal, and you also have to suppress all the fat signal. So this water signal actually gives you the grayscale imaging, which you don't want. We want these metabolites to be highlighted. The clinically useful range is from 0.9 to about 4. So what do you actually do in an MR spectroscopy? You take a grayscale image which is used as the localizer, decide which area you want to, which you are interested in. It could be a focal lesion or it could be the gray matter as in Alzheimer's disease. You arrange for the magnet or the machine to suppress the water signal and the fat signal. So only available signal is from the protons which are other than water, and you map them in the form of a spectrum or a frequency map. So what are the important metabolites that you're looking at in this manner? You want to look at NAA, which is a neuronal marker, and an axonal marker. So when it's called popularly as a neuronal marker, but it is also present in the axons. So it is a mitochondrial component, and it is transported from the neurons along the axons. Then you also want to look at choline, which is a cell membrane marker. You want to look at a molecule, sugar-like molecule called as MI, myoinositol. It changes its concentration every time there is an insult to the brain locally, or there could be a systemic disturbance like hyponatremia, hypernatremia, and you will get variation in this metabolite. Creatine is a reference. It is synthesized in the kidney and then transported to the brain. So normal brain tissue will have significant amount of creatine. Every time there is a disturbance, creatine is the last to get affected. So if you have severe hypoxic conditions and you see creatine down, then you know that this is a very severe disturbance of the metabolic function, and then it is like close to not being able to survive. That tissue is not likely to survive. Coming to what you don't want to see in the brain and normal constituent is lactate. That's why it's in red. It indicates anaerobic condition. That means there is not enough oxygen, and hence there is production of lactate by the disturbance in the Krebs cycle. It is not seen in normal brain unless you are looking at a spectrum which includes the CSF, or in a neonate. For the first 1 month of life, you can have lactate which is normal. Now this is a little bit of a problem because in neonates you are trying to look for metabolic diseases. So we do not have clear-cut levels when what amount of lactate is normal and what is not normal. We will see examples of that. This is how a spectrum looks. For an easy reading and an easy pattern formation, you should start looking at the spectrum from right to left. There should be a gentle slope of all the peaks with the tallest peak at 2.0 parts per million. There should be no tall peak here. These small humps which you see normally, particularly in adults, are macromolecules. That means they are substances like DNA, RNA, which you do not actually resolve separately, but they are seen as noise or artifacts. Then the next peak here, small peaks that you have, include second and third peak of NAA because they resonate at different points in the spectrum. What you also have is glutamate-glutamine complexes. They are divided into alpha, beta, gamma, and what you have here is beta and gamma. And then you have the next tallest peak which comes up here is creatine at 3.0. At 3.2 you have choline. This short peak at 3.56 is MI. Here what you have is second peak of creatine, and you also get alpha glutamine complexes, so you should know that here. And here is suppressed water signal. So every time you do not have adequate water suppression, there will be a peak here which will override these peaks and distort the spectrum. Every time you do not have good fat suppression or you are close to the scalp, you will have a tall peak here which will override these peaks, and that will be lipid peak. In normal circumstances, if you have lipid lactate, not in normal circumstances, when you are looking at a spectrum from the brain without contamination from the scalp and you have lipid lactate here, then that is abnormal and it will be the first tall peak coming up from 0.9 to 1.3. Now what you must understand is that lactate is present as a doublet at 1.3 and 1.4. Lipid comes up at several points in the spectrum, which is throughout the spectrum. And they may be in different concentrations and difficult to assess, but what you're going to look at is mainly the tall broad peak at 0.9 and 1.3, and there is a big overlap between lipid and lactate. So these are the peaks again to show you. This slope is called as the Hunter's angle. In an adult, when you see this slope from right to left, you know you're looking at a near normal spectrum. Then you have to go and look at the spectrum in minute details. This pattern is reversed in a neonate. That means the tallest peak is MI and NA is the shortest peak. That is called as reverse Hunter's angle, and that is also a normal variant. We'll see examples of that. When we are trying to do proton spectroscopy, we have 2 or 3 options in which we can perform this test. First one is called as single voxel. The others are called as chemical shift imaging, and they can include 2D and 3D chemical shift imaging. Another name for chemical shift imaging is multi-voxel imaging. So let us understand what it means. This is an example of a single voxel image. What have we done? We've taken a localizer and we have decided that we want information from this site. We run the sequence. It usually takes 2.2 minutes on our scanner, GE scanner. But you can change the resolution to the point where you can run even a 6-minute single voxel spectrum. You will get slight improvement in the resolution. But 2.2 is something which is practically usable and you get good information. So when you look at the spectrum, it's a generated spectrum. You have display of ratios on the right side. Most of you must be knowing that. So you select one area. The area can range from 1 to 8. Please read this as centimeter cube. It's not centimeters, it's centimeter cube. Ideally, I would suggest that keep this size by default to 2 by 2 by 2 and not allow any variations, because it increases the noise and you will not be able to interpret the study very well. The disadvantage is if the averaging is, if this lesion is small and it sits right in the center of the voxel, then you will have included a lot of normal tissue with it, and again you will have overlap of normal as well as abnormal findings. If you need another location, you will have to use a control. If you have more than one lesions, again you spend more time, and it is difficult to assess lesions in the periphery because you can, it causes contamination of the scalp. Like for example here, even if I want, I cannot shift the voxel to this side because I want to avoid the bone marrow which will be in this diploid space. So what happens is I've got part of the lesion and part of the normal parenchyma or edematous parenchyma. When I want another location, I want to assess this, then I need another voxel. That means I've spent 2.5 minutes, another 2.5 minutes, and to look at a control, you need another localization. But if we switch to multi-voxel spectroscopy or chemical shift imaging, we can assess a larger volume which is flexible. So in this, by default, the thickness of the slab goes down to 1 centimeter, and you can allow a variation in the x and y axis. But the thickness by default is 1 centimeter. But it allows you simultaneous assessment. This is how you plan the slab of a 2D acquisition. In 3D, what happens is there are several. So if you have a large tumor which is going from top to bottom of the brain, then you will add another slab like this. So you can interchange the slabs where you want to do post-processing, so you have data from the entire lesion. But again, it costs you more time. It is just like repeating these 2D CSI 3 or 4 times. But I think what is best is you take the center of the lesion where there are solid components and necrotic components and a good thick wall, and assess only at one localization. You will have enough information. This is how the data of the chemical shift imaging looks, unlike the one we saw in the single voxel where the spectrum was already displayed. In this, you have to do post-processing and then allow a display of the spectrum from different locations. So the advantage is that you can look at the wall, at the center of the lesion, at the edematous component, take a control, all from the same data. In addition, you can create color maps like this based on the amount of the metabolite or even its ratio. What do we mean by that? Here you're looking at choline, but you could even look at a choline creat ratio. These pictures are just pretty to look at, and you can give it as to the patient who will think that you have done something exotic on his brain as a study, but they do not provide information which is clinically reliable. I would rather rely on the spectra that we saw before rather than these color maps. But just to take you through what do we look at this is, if you notice in this lipid lactate, there is a big band of color on the outside at the scalp. So this is the scalp contamination which I was talking to you about. So there's a lot of lipid signal which comes from the scalp. But what is relevant for you is what is the lipid within this wax cell. So there is lipid here. How do you know this is correct, this is accurate? Because you don't have it on the contralateral side. That means you can rely on this lipid signal. Coming to here, what is this showing you? It's a choline map. So you have good amount of choline in the normal parenchyma, and you have some choline at the edge of this lesion, but not much choline here. What do you have here? You have good amount of Na in the normal appearing parenchyma, but not enough Na here. So how would the spectrum look? Na peak would have been down, choline also would have been down, and you would have had a tall lipid lactate. So what this tells me is that this patient is, if it is a brain tumor patient who has been radiated, then I know we are looking at predominance of a treatment-induced effect resulting in necrosis rather than a recurrent neoplasm. Now, this is a very important slide for you to understand basics of MR spectroscopy. When we are looking at a wax cell, what are we doing? We are actually filtering out what is the chemical component of that area. That means if I took the same concentration as the brain of a control subject and put all those metabolites in a bottle, I would get the same spectrum. So this is spectrum of a liquid which had these metabolites in the same concentration as a normal brain, and you have identical spectra. Does it make sense? Why is this important? Because you must, whenever you put a wax cell, you should know what to expect within that anatomy. If you know that you're looking at a necrotic lesion, you should expect lipid lactate in the wax cell. So that if you have that kind of thinking, then you will be able to interpret your spectroscopy study very well. Now let me again elaborate with an example. This is a normal looking brain, except there is slight atrophy for a young, if I tell you this is a young 30-year-old male, ventricles are prominent and some sulci are prominent. So when I looked at this spectrum, I have shown you a normal here for control. When I looked at this, I thought that there is slight reduction in Na, and if I was to minus these peaks, then I would have thought that this patient is suffering from something like which is allowing a neuronal loss such as HIV. That may be the first thing that you see on a patient in the brain of a patient who has HIV. But in addition, we had these peaks. One of this is like a triplet, and then you had a high alpha beta gamma glutamate complexes, and these peaks are also a little taller than expected. So I thought there is something more happening. But there was no history of anything. The patient had just presented to us with forgetfulness, no other history. So when we looked back and looked at the literature, this is a triplet caused by alcohol ingestion, and here you have a quadruplet. That means there are 4 small peaks which are overlapping the normal peaks. So this is what I meant. That means normal brain without alcohol would look like this. When you put alcohol into the brain, it would look like this. So if we put you in the scanner after a party, this is how it will look. Now again, what is important is what does the wax cell include? You have a small lesion here. This is a Dr. colleague of ours, and you have very faint enhancement, some area of cystic change, but the spectrum looks near normal for this cortical location, except for slight reduction in NAA, no other abnormality. And after 3 months, look at the lesion. So it's big, large, necrotic. And what do you have here? A tall lipid lactate peak. Choline peak is elevated, Na is reduced. So this reflects the morphological change that you are seeing in this lesion. At this point, there was no morphological change or pathological change, so you had a near normal spectrum. That means relative preservation of the spectral pattern is seen because there is relative integrity of the neurons is still maintained. But here you have loss of the normal anatomy, and that is reflected in the spectral pattern. If you understand this, then you can do a good MR spectroscopy pattern, MR spectroscopy interpretation. Now again, coming to lactate versus lipid, there is always a question whether this is lactate or whether it is lipid. You should not use your time and energy to try and differentiate between the two, because usually you cannot differentiate. But you must always try and concentrate as to what is predominating. Is it a lactate predominating peak or is it a lipid predominating peak? Why is that important? We will see examples of that. Lactate is a doublet, so you should learn to recognize that. The middle limb should come significantly down between these two peaks, and pure lactate will look sharp like this, whereas lipid is a tall, broad peak, and usually it will have a hump on the right side. We call it as a shoulder. Read this as right, I'm sorry. I must have written it after a party. Okay. Now this is a lactate peak, a pure lactate. What else you have here? No Na, no creatine, or creatine etc. is very low. So this is a short TE spectrum. Now I would like to emphasize that there are books which always speak about long TE spectrum, or papers which talk about long TE spectrum in multi-voxel. And your application guys will also teach you that, but that is not the right way to do it. I would say start your study with a single voxel spectroscopy using short TE, followed by, if necessary, with a long TE. Also do your multi-voxel with short TE, you will get more information. We will see again examples of that if I have a slide, or I will verbally tell you. So also notice that this also has a shoulder to the right, which is 0.9. So what happens in an infarct? You have anaerobic metabolism, that is why lactate comes up. You have neuronal loss because there's complete cutoff of blood supply and neuronal death. So you don't have the normal Na peak. Very rarely you will get this complete cutoff. Except infarct and meningioma, you don't normally see this cutoff. Why is lipid present in this? Because there is cell membrane disintegration starting, and that's why you get a shoulder along with lactate every time. When you run a long T spectrum, that is 144 milliseconds, it can be 135 on other scanners, but it just means the same. You have inversion of the lactate peak below the baseline, that is essential. But if you also notice, the lactate peak loses its height. That means if lactate peak was short, you would not see it on this spectrum. You would lose the signal because you are allowing a long time of relaxation for that metabolite. So all the metabolites which have short relaxation times, you will not see them. Like MI you will not see, lactate in small amounts you will not see. So in a child you may miss out on an important differential diagnosis of a mitochondrial disorder. Second thing what happens is Na peak is also shorter, choline peak is also shorter. This is not corresponding spectrum, but just to explain to you. There is another timing that you may resort to, which is called as very long TE spectrum, in which lactate remains upright, but lipid component gets suppressed. Practically, I do not find a use to run all these extra sequences except when I'm assessing and I'm not sure about a tuberculoma, or in very rare conditions when I want to do, again still further differentiate in a radiation necrosis between the two. What happens to lipid? As I said, tall, broad peak predominating at 1.3 ppm with a shoulder to the right at 0.9, and you have some choline peak here. At 144, if you see this small inversion, that means the lactate component has inverted but lipid component has remained upright, and this is called as a lipid suppression technique, 288 milliseconds. Lipid gets suppressed, so the whatever is upright is the lactate component. Sorry, this pointer is not very good. So what you have this short peak here, if you can see here. Yeah, so this is the residual lactate peak. Now coming to global versus focal spectroscopy. In global, what is the difference between global and focal is that in global there is no anatomic change in the brain. That means you'll be looking at diseases like hepatic encephalopathy, Alzheimer's disease. And when we speak about focal, what we mean is that there is a focal change in the anatomy, like we saw the tumor, or we will look at the tuberculoma, etc. Now in these patients, when you're looking at global spectroscopy, it is very important to have the values matched to a normal collection of values. Either you do it yourself on your machine, or we use this which has been provided by Dr. Brian Ross's Institute, Huntington Medical Research Center, and in which again we have to match the parameters, whether the TR, TE and averaging values are correct or not, and whether the scanner is the same or not. So here it shows that this is with 35 milliseconds, just as we like to do it, and these are the different locations: anterior white matter, parietal white matter, occipital grey matter, frontal grey matter. So what happens is, why do we have to be specific? Because the white matter spectrum looks different from the grey matter spectrum. What is the difference between these two? Choline peak here is taller, whereas choline peak here is shorter. So because it is said that there are more exons here, you get and cell membrane constituent is more, you get a taller choline peak. Pons, the spectrum from the pons is different, so you have slightly higher choline level and a slightly shorter Na peak. Also, if you see, the peak separation is more here, whereas the peak separation is less here. So if you tell me that this spectrum is from the frontal white matter, then I will start thinking whether we are looking at some lesion which is causing demyelination. And if you show me that this is from the cerebellum, I will call it normal with Na being so low. But if you show it to me from the cortex, I will say that there is beginning of Alzheimer's or some other type of dementia in this patient. So location you must pay attention to, and you should know how the normals look in every location. This is what we spoke about, reverse Hunter's angle in neonates. In the elderly, anyway, Na goes down because there is neuronal loss. So if you did spectra for few of us, we would have low Na compared to a younger adult. Now what happens with the dangers of inconsistency? If you look at this spectrum which was acquired at 35 and you had certain choline creat ratio, if you do it another one at a follow-up with 144 milliseconds in the same patient, this choline level will go up because you have given it enough time to relax, so more choline signal is collected, and you will be wrong if you relied on the choline creat ratio. Now there are specific locations when you will assess global spectroscopy patients. You have to decide where you will put the spectrum prior to doing the study. So if you are assessing for dementia, you will choose the cingulate gyrus. If you are looking at hepatic encephalopathy, you will target the white matter, and so forth. Okay. So this is an example how you should place your voxel for assessing patients with dementia. So what is this localizer? How is it taken? It's a 5 millimeter thick section, a stack of images obtained from base of the brain up to the vertex with no gap. It's a zero gap, and it's a straight orthogonal. So you don't allow an oblique plane. Then you choose the section in which the roof of the ventricles are just about seen last. You place your voxel. Ask your application guy. In our machine, by default, it allows 2 sections below and 2 sections above to be assessed. So here we are avoiding the scalp, and here we are avoiding the CSF. So this is how the spectrum localization should be. You avoid the cuneus here, and you avoid the corpus callosum. Then we know that you've taken the correct location. That is the cingulate gyrus. This is how the white matter location is placed. Again, you try to look at where the white matter is widest. Put your voxel. It will automatically take 2 sections below and 2 sections above. By default, you will include some ventricle fluid from the ventricle, and by default, you will get some cortical inclusion. But that is fine. That is the best you can get of the white matter. This is how your frontal grey matter can be localized when you're looking at frontotemporal dementias. It is more challenging here because you don't have space, and you will be close to the paranasal sinuses as well as the skull vault. So here again you have to be careful. This was when we had older machines. Now we have 3D, so you can change the plane in any pattern you want. But earlier we had to be very careful and do this kind of localization. So let's look at examples of dementia. We unfortunately, sorry, I don't have the normal spectrum. Usually I include it here. But what it tells us is that we have reduction in NAA. In a normal adult, NAA by creat ratio should be 1.4. Here, if we assess this to be creatinine peak, which is 1, and if we measure the height of the NAA peak, it will be about 1.2 times the creatinine peak. That's how you can do your ratios even if you do not have the display. So MI peak is taller than the creatinine peak, and MI creat ratio would be something like 1.2 again. Choline creat is about half, so it's 0.5. So that is how you look at your, even if you don't have the display, if somebody asks you what are the ratios, you can do your own calculation. So what we have here is reduction in NA and increase in the height of MI peak. This tells us that we are looking at, MI is an indicator of these amyloid tangles which are found in the brain, and NA's loss of reduction in NA suggests loss of neurons. So we are looking at probably an Alzheimer's variety of dementia. Coming to this spectrum, there is slight reduction in NA, but there is not significant elevation of MI. So then we are looking at other than Alzheimer's dementia, which could be vascular and many other causes. So the same applies for the frontal. If you had the same pattern in the frontal parenchyma, you would think of frontotemporal dementia. Coming to hepatic encephalopathy, it's very interesting how the spectrum looks. To say whether glutamate complexes are elevated or not, new people have confusion. When you have this nice concavity coming from the second limb of Na towards this side, then you know that glutamate complexes are present but are not elevated. When you have this thing reversed into a convexity, then you know that you have elevation of glutamine complexes. So you will have beta gamma here, and you will have multiple peaks here which are alpha. So when you see combination of both, then you know that you're looking at elevation of glutamate complexes. Why does that happen? Because of the hyperamonic state, or sometimes even when you have recovering hypoxia, you can get these elevated. So what is the next thing you're looking at? There is slight reduction in the height of Na peak. Glutamate complexes are elevated. But what is more important is Mi is low. Why is Mi low? Because again of hyperamonic state. Ammonia levels in the brain, when increased, they cause hyperosmolysis, and that's why Mi goes down. What is happening to choline here? It is also very low. Why is it low in spite of the white matter location? Because choline is synthesized in the liver, and because of liver dysfunction, we do not have enough choline. So this tells us that this patient is in hepatic encephalopathy. They need to differentiate this from coma caused by excessive alcohol drinking versus whether the patient is in hepatic encephalopathy. Also, these hepatic encephalopathy changes are reversed when there is good amount of treatment received. MR spectroscopy has a role in white matter disorders only to differentiate Canavans from other types of leukodystrophy. In Canavans, there is accumulation of NAA. So this is the only condition in which NA levels go up. In all the other conditions, you have NA reduction. Every time there is demyelination or dysmyelination, NA goes down. So you may be able to tell that there is an abnormal white matter in this patient which is diffusely causing high T2 signal. And if you want to differentiate it from Alexander's, advanced Alexander's or metachromatic leukodystrophy, then because of high NA level, you can say that this is Canavan's disease. So you don't need a biopsy, or you don't have to wait till the patient dies. Now, when you want to assess for mitochondrial disorders, you will be looking at the basal ganglia and try to confirm the presence of lactate by doing an inversion sequence, as we spoke about. Hypoxia and trauma also, you can use single voxel spectroscopy. There is a pattern in which there is reduction of NA. Lactate starts appearing. This is when you start doing serial MR spectroscopy. You will have increase in glutamate complexes and ultimately loss of, this is the typing error, creatine. The worst infliction that can happen because of hypoxia or trauma is complete loss of creatine. This is the serial mapping of a brain in which there was hypoxia after anesthesia problems. Arrest during anesthesia. So what you have is, if you notice, gradually Na is going down. You see lipid lactate coming up slowly, or increasing rather. You see the glutamine. So here there is a nice concavity, but there is a convexity increasing. So this is beta gamma glutamine complexes. And what you see is creatine is starting to go down as the last resort. Now let's look at examples of focal. Focal is challenging because for global you can train your technicians and they can do the scan. In focal you may have to do much more monitoring than you would have to do for global. So we are looking at various lesions, and we'll see again examples of that. What is important is where will we put the spectrum will depend on what the clinician wants to know and what is the previous history. And the challenge is because of the variation in the anatomy, so there may be blood, there may be fluid, we have to make sure that we acquire some kind of homogeneity and we have a high signal to noise ratio. We must, as much as possible, try to avoid CSF. So even though I'm including normal parenchyma here, rather than just restricting to the lesion, I will try to avoid the CSF here and include normal parenchyma here. So what is the spectrum showing here? First look, it doesn't look very abnormal. Why is that important to know? It means that there is not much of neuronal destruction here. So mentally you have decided that the insult to the brain is mild to moderate, not very severe. Second thing what we want to see is there is some amount of lactate. So what might be happening is there must be contamination from the CSF, either from a slice lower or above. So what should be the next step? We should try and take a voxel from the opposite side, identical location, to see whether lactate is present from the lesion or from away from the lesion. Now if this is an acute insult and you have lactate, then that is expected. After a few days, if you're scanning the patient and this lesion becomes subacute, you do not expect the lactate. So you have to think like that. Coming to what is happening to Na, there is slight reduction, slight elevation of choline because we must be including a lot of gray matter here in terms of lentiform nucleus in the slice below. So there is slight increase in choline here. So what this tells me is we are looking at some kind of a demyelination, which is reversible disease, and it has not allowed a lot of neuronal destruction. And it is in the acute phase. Coming to partial voluming, this is what my technician had done. He had placed the voxel partly here and partly in the edematous parenchyma because he could not understand what is the lesion and what is edema. But I had to call the patient back and do this localization. And you see the variation in the spectrum. So here the lipid lactate is less, as we know only a small part, this is a tuberculoma actually, a small part of the tuberculoma is included, and major portion is edematous normal parenchyma, and so you have preservation of neurons. But here if you see, there is major portion is the lesion, so there is reduction in Na, and we have included all the caseated portion, so we have a lot of lipid lactate here with some elevation of choline. Tuberculomas have high choline, not because of tumorous situation or cell membrane proliferation, but because there is a collection of macrophages which also have thick cell membranes and they cause increase in choline. So elevation of choline does not allow you to differentiate between a tuberculoma and a neoplasm, because even a tuberculoma can have. So this is what I meant by contralateral side technique, as I told you to do it in the previous patient. So you have a abnormality here. So what do we see in the spectrum? And I have taken a contralateral normal. Why do I want a contralateral normal? Because I'm not used to looking at a spectrum from this location. So I should know what the normal looks like. So I can comment on how much is the disturbance. First look, the spectrum looks noisy. So I know there is a lot of water included. So it's basically a water lesion which has a lot of edema in terms of water, which is also confirmed by this component of lactate here. So no lactate peak here, but there is a good amount of lactate peak here. So I know it's coming from the lesion and it is acute. Sorry, but every time I use the pointer from the bar here, it becomes, it slides further, okay. So you have slight elevation of choline compared to this. So choline create ratio here is 1.2, but it is almost 2.0 here. So I know there is some cell membrane breakdown which is allowing choline to be assessed. Usually choline is bound in the cell membrane and that's why it looks small. But when it's liberated, then it becomes taller. So this is what it tells me is we're looking at some kind of an demyelination or encephalitic kind of an insult where there is a reversible abnormality rather than a concrete insult. Coming to what happens if you do a scan after post-gadolinium injection, there is not much change in the spectrum, as you can see. It only allows you to make sure that you have taken the correct lesions in the voxel rather than going here, which would have included only the periphery of the lesion. So it is important to localize your voxel on the contrast study. Let us look at some examples of tumors. So you have a lesion here which is infiltrative involving the cortex. The cortex is thickened, and it's a mild abnormality without necrosis, and you have a relative preservation of the spectral pattern. This is the normal spectrum. So what you have is spectrum looks fine, but Na is shorter than you would like. Choline is only marginally elevated for this cortical location. The peak should have been here, but we have it here, so it's 1.2. MI is slightly low. And again, I don't know why these lipid lactates are there. Is it because we are close to the skull, or is it really tumor content? When I obtained a contralateral side, this was not there, so that means it is contained within the tumor. So we are looking at a low-grade tumor. That means this tumor has not allowed a lot of neuronal destruction, so we can safely call it as a low-grade tumor. And that's what it is morphologically also. So similar looking cortical lesion with a lot of variation, slight variation in the morphology with some necrotic areas. Reflected very well here. Sorry, this labeling has shifted. This one step this side. So this is MI, this is choline, this is creatine, this is Na, this is lipid lactate. So what we see is this necrotic component is giving this lipid lactate. Na is reduced, although the lesion looks the same as this, but the destruction of Na is much more. That means this insult is kind of moderate to severe rather than just mild. And you have choline which is significantly elevated. So we have a choline create ratio of almost 3.0. So we're looking at a higher grade of tumor, probably an anaplastic astrocytoma. What is important is we must tell them to target this area for the biopsy so they get the correct histopathology. What happens when we go one grade higher? The lipid lactate content increases because lipid lactate is now formed because of anaerobic metabolism as well as because of cell death and necrosis. And choline level is high. Sometimes you get a scaling artifact. Lipid lactate is so tall that you do not see the other metabolite peaks. That doesn't mean that choline is absent. So if you have a very highly necrotic lesion which has a thin wall, you may not see enough choline. Coming to this was one of my prize cases which allowed the clinicians to really gain confidence in my interpretation. This was a young girl of 31 who had this first episode of seizures and she had this lesion. If you see, it's surface lesion with some necrosis, etc. When I looked at it, I wanted to call it on imaging as metastasis because it was not fitting into anything else. It has partly well circumscribed margins. It had some necrosis. It looked like a high-grade tumor, but it was not glioblastoma. So what do I call it? How can I call it as metastasis in an unknown primary in a 31-year-old? Nobody will believe me. When I put the spectrum, at that point we were not doing perfusion, etc. very much, but we were doing a lot of spectro. So when I put the voxel right in the center, what I have is tall lipid lactate, which is fine that there is some amount of necrosis. This is what I wanted to show you. These are also lipid peaks. That means lipid comes at many places and it will overlap with many other peaks and you will not make out because they are in small amount. But these are the ones which predominate. You see the small sharp doublet here. So this is the lactate component of the lesion. This is Na, which is completely absent. So although you see a peak here, it is not the neuronal marker Na which we are used to seeing, the N-acetyl aspartate. In a lesion like tumors and high-grade glioblastomas and metastasis, you can get N-acetyl compounds. These are called as other N-acetyl compounds, that is other than N-acetyl aspartate, and they also resonate at the same place. So it looks like Na, but it's not Na. So you must learn to recognize this. Why was I very sure this is not Na? Because I don't have a creatine peak here. We spoke about this. Creatine is made in the kidneys and transported to the brain. That means all neuronal tissue should have had creatine, but there is no creatine here. And choline peak is very tall. So I was very sure we're looking at a non-glial neoplasm. It complemented my morphological diagnosis, and I gave a single diagnosis for this, solitary metastasis in an unknown primary. And this patient was worked up and was found to have a breast carcinoma. So we can rely on spectroscopy if we understand it properly. Coming to another non-glial neoplasm, again these are not expected to have creatine because this is not a normal neuronal tissue. You have high choline because of the cell membrane proliferation, and you have a tall lipid lactate. So when you see a twin peak appearance of choline and lipid, you are likely to be looking at a lymphoma. Again, lymphomas have grades, so it is not very typical that you will get this twin peak spectrum every time. Also, their metabolism differs. Early diseases, small diseases, you will see as near normal spectrum, which is lipid lactate. So this is not like a classical signature spectrum, but as an evolved high-grade lymphoma, this is the pattern that you will see. This is also one of my cases where the clinician was not accepting my diagnosis. 4-year-old coming with status epilepticus, a T2 dark lesion in the temporal fossa. First thing you want to think of is a PNET. But I was very sure we're not looking at a PNET. If you see the consistency of this lesion on T2, it looks like fibrosis. So I knew we are looking at something which is hard and fibrosed. When I ran the spectrum, what we have is a triplet here. So in the place where lipid lactate comes up, instead of just the lactate doublet, we have a triplet. Alanine is a constituent found in meningiomas, some types of meningiomas. It is also a doublet, but it comes very close to lactate, so it becomes a triplet. It overrides the lactate peak, and instead of a quadruplet or two peaks side by side, you see a triplet. So it's called an alanine triplet. You see here 1, 2 and 3. Here again, Na is completely absent. That means you are looking at a non-neuronal lesion. Choline is high, but again no creatine. And mannitol was given to control as part of treatment protocol for the seizures. So this was a meningioma spectrum. Again, single diagnosis, no differential, and that's what it turned out to be in pathology. Now coming to some cases which can be perplexing. A 60-year-old who had this low-grade looking lesion in the temporal lobe. This is how the normal spectrum should look. What we have is Na significantly reduced. There is small amount of lipid lactate, but we have a tall peak of creatine, low choline. So if this is a tumor, why is choline low? And why is Mi so high? So this tumor type is one which contains oligodendroglial cells, in which Creatine is present in higher concentration, so there is a pseudo decrease in the size of choline and choline-creat ratio. Glycine, these cells also contain glycine, which comes at the same place as Mi, and so you get addition of Mi and glycine, which becomes a taller peak. So if we recognize this, we can predict the histopathology to the pathologist that we're looking at an oligodendroglial tumor. Coming to glioma versus tuberculoma, a peripherally enhancing lesion. This must be a common issue even here. How do you differentiate a ring enhancing lesion from a neoplasm? So this is a young child with seizures. So almost looking like a ring enhancing lesion, but if you see the T2 signal is quite bright, so we know we are not looking at a tuberculoma, but then what is this? This is a pilocytic astrocytoma. In a lipid lactate peak, in a tuberculoma spectrum, you would have had a very tall lipid lactate peak and absent NAA, but you have in here preserved spectrum with a lot of lipid lactate and high choline, so we're looking at a pilocytic astrocytoma. Coming to the setting where you'd require to image these patients after radiotherapy and chemotherapy treatment. These patients are now living longer because of the treatment options available, and we have to scan them again and again, and we must recognize the difference between radiation change and tumor recurrence. So this was a patient who has this ring enhancing lesion on a CT scan, operated, and now a new enhancing lesion is coming. There was some enhancement after radiation, but which was increasing in size. So if you see with multivoxel imaging, what have we done? You have some spectra in which there is high choline and a lot of lipid lactate, and you have, this is a normal control. So this is a normal control, and then you look at different parts of the lesion and try to see what is happening to the choline. So in the center of the lesion, which is voxel 5, we have high choline and high lipid lactate, so we predicted this as a recurrence. Now why is this difficult to believe? Because while the patient is on treatment or just completed treatment, you do not expect recurrence so early. So it is very important that we give the that means they will stop treatment after this. If we call it recurrence, they will stop treating the patient. So it's very important to be accurate in this location. So again, the center of the spectra, 3, 4 and 5 are showing you tall choline and tall lipid lactate. That means the lactate peak is not coming from radiation necrosis, but it is coming from proliferation and anaerobic metabolism. This patient was operated on this side for a PNET, that means a primitive neuroectodermal tumor, and there was a new enhancing lesion on the opposite side, which shows us no metabolites and only a tall lipid lactate. So this is the scaling artifact which I was telling you. On chemical shift imaging, you can sit on the workstation and manipulate this data in such a way that you throw out this peak from the area of interest and you try and assess if there are any other peaks available. So this requires some bit of work, these complicated cases. You cannot just take one single voxel and give your opinion. A T2 dark lesion with surrounding edema, rounded lesion with some necrotic change, very tall lipid lactate peak, no other metabolite elevation, we are looking at a tuberculoma. As versus this T2 dark lesion, sorry I have not labeled it, it is another T2 dark lesion looking almost like this, but more amount of edema, disproportionate edema. We are looking at a neoplastic lesion, and luckily we have a tall choline peak also to support our diagnosis. So tall lipid lactate with high choline in the given clinical setting of a known primary, you know you're looking at a metastatic disease. Some of you must be asked to differentiate between neurocysticercosis and tuberculomas in your practice. I do not suggest we use MR spectroscopy, but we have some clinicians who force us to do it. And how do we use it in our practice? Ideally, if you took out the cysticercal cyst, this is the kind of spectrum you will get with a lot of amino acids because it's like a parasitic cyst. When you look at the normal, in the normal brain in the clinical setting, in vivo setting, the cyst is small and you will have a lot of edema. So you will get a spectrum which is relatively preserved, short, slight reduction of NAA, elevation of glutamate complexes, small amount of lactate depending on the stage of the cyst, and you will get complete absence of MI. This is a clue to differentiate tuberculoma from other, neurocysticercosis from other lesions. There is local osmolytic imbalance and MI goes completely low. As versus another ring enhancing lesion, which is, you also have diffusion to support you in the diagnosis of abscess. But you must make sure you get the, if you are doing MR spectroscopy on these patients, you must get the center of the lesion and not at the edge, because the edge gives you a different spectrum. So this is a bizarre spectrum which shows you multiple amino acids such as succinate, acetate, isoleucine, valine, etc. So when you have ring enhancing lesions, how will you be able to differentiate one from the other? Mostly you will not be able to differentiate reliably from a glioblastoma from a tuberculoma, especially if the wall is thin and there is not elevation of choline. But you will definitely be able to differentiate an abscess from a glioblastoma and an abscess from a tuberculoma. So you must understand the limitations of the technique and try and assess, use spectro in that context. MRS has its pitfalls, like hemorrhage will give you this tall peak which will be interpreted as lipid lactate. When I was doing these scans early, when a patient came like this, I swore that this is the tuberculoma because there is a tall lipid lactate, because by that time I did not know that hemorrhage also gives a peak like that. So this is a hemorrhagic necrotic neoplasm, probably. Plus, when we are close to the skull vault, we may not get a correct spectrum. So when you try to assess this lesion, there is no elevation of choline, although we know this is metastatic and has high lipid lactate. So how will you use spectro in this? You will write in your report that the lesion is close to the skull vault and hence the study is suboptimal. Although the lipid lactate is high and as expected in a metastatic disease process, lack of choline is unusual. However, in spite of these limitations, the morphology of the lesion suggests a metastatic disease process. So you put your thoughts clearly on paper and give a combination of the report of morphology and your image on spectroscopy. So it's not spectroscopy alone that you will try to interpret. First, base your diagnosis on conventional imaging, your clinical setting, and then try to see how the spectro fits in and get support from that. I spoke about this lesion and evolution. Lymphoma is the correct example. When it starts, it shows you normal spectrum, as we saw in that doctor, even a glioblastoma, and sometimes the lesions are small. What happens when you switch from 1.5 to 3T? There is no change in the spectral pattern except the signal to noise ratio is better and the peak separation is better. So the resolution is better. And otherwise there is no additional information. Some peaks like GABA and glutamine complexes you can detect better, but in clinical day-to-day practice it's not really important. So just to conclude, it's a simple add-on technique, maybe definitive in borderline cases like I showed you examples. It's very good to assess response to therapy and monitor whether there is disease progression or not. And it's an excellent research tool. I have done some research which has gone into the Journal of Magnetic Research, Resonance Imaging, the best journal in MRI right now, because of one spectro, because I had the habit of putting spectro on every lesion that I saw. And just that it has to be thoughtfully planned and carefully interpreted with pathology in mind. You have to go back to your Robbins textbook of pathology and try and think like the pathologist. It can diagnose and predict histology and support the pathologist. Many times I have given confidence to the pathologist that what you're seeing is correct, my diagnosis is the same on spectro. Because if it's a weird location for a certain type of lesion, they may not be confident to give that diagnosis. But if you, as a radiologist, also support that yes, I agree with your diagnosis in a joint meeting, then that will come out to have more value for the patient and definitely as a problem-solving tool. Thank you very much for a patient listening, and I again apologize for the delay. If there are any questions, I'll take them.
Thank you, Dr. Pungalkar, for your nice presentation regarding a very
to assess liver fibrosis and avoid biopsies, but maybe next time we can talk about that. In the meantime, if there is any liver special clinic that requires any assistance, you all can contact us. And any cases you want to send, you can send across. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Now I would request the chairpersons to say a few words.
Participants, ladies and gentlemen, you are already exhausted. I don't want to take your time much. So I just want to thank the speakers. The first speaker was Dr. Kamaldeen Usmani, and unfortunately we couldn't see him. We could not hear his personal presentation. Due to unavoidable reason, he couldn't come to the conference. He has sent a video presentation which was shown to us. I hope his lecture will have some. Our radiologists, particularly the young generation radiologists, will be benefited from his lectures. Number two, paper was the presenter, speaker was Dr. Sona Pungavkar. She spoke about the clinical MR spectroscopy. She mentioned the A to Z of spectroscopy, MR spectroscopy. And thus she tried to make it simple of this complex subject. So I hope our radiologists who are working in neurology setup, they will be definitely benefited from this lecture. Now I want my co-speaker to speak something if he...
Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the speaker, last speaker, Dr. Sona Pungavkar. Her lecture is very nice and self-explanatory, and it is, I think, everybody who is present here are benefited from her lecture. I will request Sona Pungavkar visit next time in our next conference, radiology conference in near future with her new technique and new lecture schedule. Thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, the chairpersons. Now I would like to request Dr. Sona Pungavkar to come up on the stage and take a little token of appreciation from the chairpersons. Yes, yes. As our first speaker, Dr. Kamaldin Ojjani is not physically present over here, so I think we will give her token of appreciation so that when he comes over here, he can get his work. Now, Dr. Sona Pungavkar. Thank you, Dr. Sona Pungavkar, for your nice presentation once again. Now I would like to request Dr. Sona Pungavkar to hand over the token of appreciations to the chairpersons as well. First, Professor Dr. M.A. Bashar, one of the senior most radiologists in Bangladesh, and then Professor Dr. Debar Hussain. Thank you, chairpersons. Thank you, Dr. Sona. That's all here from session number 3 of today's presentation session is almost done over here.